So the topic for our meeting today is going to be obsession, and obsession has this our earthly meaning, but today we're going to talk mostly about spiritual obsession, which is related but not necessarily, right? So we're going to cover what is obsession from a spiritual veil, what are the mechanisms that the spirits interact with us, and how do they um, create this obsession, this mutual obsession with us. And then I'm going to cover hopefully how to get rid of obsession, and how can we work on ourselves to really progress and get rid of like the obsessors in our life, and not to become obsessors of other people as well. So hopefully by the end, you guys will understand the process, and then at the end we're also going to have time for questions if anybody has any questions. So let's get started. What is obsession? Spiritual obsession is an endeavor exercised by inferior spirits, or spirits that are not evolved, over others, in order to either subjugate them or to have them under certain control. Um, and one thing to keep in mind, most of us incarnated or even the disincarnated spirits suffer or have already suffered from some form of obsession, because obsession is mainly caused due to an imbalance of inner forces, and those inner forces, they portray each other, right? So, and unlike most people think, like when we think about like spiritual obsession, we typically think that the so-called dead imply that on the living, right? But then that's not necessarily true. Obsession can also happen from living beings. So that's why we have to always watch out if we're not being manipulated. And especially nowadays where data flows so easily everywhere with like social media and all kinds of like different tools, we always have to watch to, like I said, make sure we're not being manipulated. And this manipulation can lead to an obsession, to the point that we're not really being true to ourselves anymore, right? So obsession can come either from the spiritual world to our living world, or to our earthly world, or it can also happen among us here. So again, something to keep in mind. And obsession can affect an individual in several different ways, but Kardec defines obsession in three different levels. So if you guys look at the Medium's book, he defines obsession as what he calls a simple obsession, a fascination, and then the third one, which is the more severe one, subjugation. So let's go over some of those details here. So simple obsession, and the difference between simple obsession and fascination, it's the fact that a simple obsession can be caused, and it's mostly caused due to some sort of vice that we carry, right? So, in that vice, as you guys can imagine, we human beings, we have several vices here on Earth. It could be eating, it could be drugs, alcohol, and excessive sex. I mean, there are so many things that become vices to us, right? And we tend to really be obcecated by them. And so what happens is, when we go back to our spiritual world, if we're not very well evolved, which most of us are not because we're still here, we tend to carry with us some of those desires, right? And then what happens is, since we cannot physically smoke a cigarette or drink alcohol or use drugs as we are in the spiritual world, those spirits tend to tag themselves to living human beings just so they can have that energy, they can have that sensation, they can have a little piece of whatever that person is feeling to themselves. And this is, and they might influentiate you to do more of that, being whatever that is, right? Like I said, If you tend to eat a lot, they will like kind of give you tips in order, oh, you should eat now, or you should go and smoke a cigarette, or you should go and have drugs, or whatever vices that we have. So they might influentiate you to do a little bit more than that, and then again they can absorb a little bit of that energy. What that means that not necessarily they want to cause you any harm, they just want to have that feeling the same way we have it here, right? So that's, I would say, that's what is defined as simple obsession. And a fascination is something that it's much more serious than a simple obsession. So in a simple obsession, the spirit that is, or in the case we're mostly talking about spiritual obsession. I'm not talking about living and people that obsesses others as living here on earth, but I'm talking about spiritual obsession. So in the simple obsession, they are suggesting ideas to our minds, and then that trigger us to do those things that I just explained, right? But in fascination, it gets more complicated than that, because the way it works is they start working in our mind, and they do this repeated work that make us change our acceptance to the world, right? So they even sometimes make us accept the most ridiculous statements and theories as truth, and in some cases making us to do the most insensate, compromising, and even dangerous activities. So we have to watch out for those. In some cases, that kind of obsession might be happening not only due to this desire of the spirit to have a sensation, but maybe, and again, I'm not suggesting this happens all the time, but it might happen sometimes. Maybe we did something bad to that particular spirit, or to someone that particular spirit really care for, and that spirit, like giving his undeveloped nature, is trying to find revenge, right? So they want to revenge whatever bad we as human beings did in our past lives, or even in this particular life, right? So that's why we always have to watch out for not creating those pseudo enemies, because this can be happening for several for ages, honestly. So fascination can be happening due to that fact. So maybe, like I said, we did something wrong to a spirit in a past life. And then you have the third degree, which is the most severe degree, which is called subjugation, which is a constraint which paralyzes the will of the victim of the obsessor, right? And then it makes that person that is being subjugated to act without its will. In the former days, the term possession was employed to express what we call subjugation now. So some of other religions, they might call this possession, uh, and but and this subjugation has also two facets, which one can be a slightly more severe fascination, which is called the moral subjugation, or it can also be corporeal. So in the first case, uh, for the moral subjugation, the subjugated is often drawn on to do things which are foolish or representative, and which he's deluded uh, into regarding wise and proper. So, like at that point, the spirits are not just sending us ideas; they're actually controlling our ideas. So they're changing our values. They're changing. We're not even it's almost like we're not even aware we're doing those things, because they're controlling our mind, right? And then in the second case, which is the even more severe one, the corporeal subjugation, and it's when they actually control our material organs, provoking involuntary movements or acts. So if you guys read the Medium's book from Kardec, he tells a story about this gentleman that was suffering from corporeal subjugation, and then the spirits forced him to basically put himself on his knees and propose to someone walking on the street for marriage, as where like just for pure how can I say entertainment of themselves, right? So they're basically making him to do something ridiculous that doesn't make any sense and that he wouldn't do by himself, and just for the fun of it. So those spirits tend to be, again, looking for some sort of like revenge and make us look like we are insane, right? So one thing to keep in mind, and being a worker of a spiritist house for a while, it's very common that people that are suffering from more severe obsession, either being fascination or even subjugation, they they usually, sometimes they're coming from like different religions, and people say, oh, why don't you go and go to a spirit center, they're gonna help you out, right? And yeah, and we definitely do. I think that's a good thing if people are looking for that kind of help, but we also need to keep in mind, not always that you're feeling some sort of like imbalance in your mental health that is being caused by obsession. So it's always to keep in mind, good to keep in mind that that might be happening due to a hormonal imbalance. There might be factors in your body that are affecting you. So in addition to looking for spiritual support and help in a spiritual center, is also important to look for medical advice, because again, you could be suffering from lack of some sort of vitamin, or there are several agents in our body that might lead us into depression and other things, and we don't want to just blame on the spirits, because it could be something related to our body. So just want to give this caveat, because it's very common, especially people, like the first thing they say, oh, I've been, even without like studying much spiritism, people will say, oh, I've been obsessed by a spirit, I want to get rid of it, so yeah, in a lot of cases that could be happening, but it could also be this your body might be going through some different process that needs medical attention. So and sometimes those things go together, right? But just going back to this corporal subjugation, so those spirits really make us look like insane, and they might drive us to madness if we don't really treat this properly, right? So all right, so we covered what is obsession and different degrees of obsessions. So I want to cover now, what are the mechanisms that the spirits use for obsession. So in, especially like in a simple obsession, the obsessor typically projects some images into our mind, and then through repetition and mutual affiliation to the topic. So like I said, if we are drug addicts, right? We have this mutual connection between us and that spirit, and we are looking for the same thing. So what happens is they will use that to trigger the desire to use a certain drug, right? Or to eat more food, or to have more sex. So they'll try to identify those triggers on you, and then they'll use that just so that lead you to go and look for whatever you mutually desire. So unlike most people think, uh uh this obsession is not a unilateral thing. It's actually mutual uh connection that you and that or several other spirits have. So that's why when people say, oh, this spirit is going after me, it's not really them going after you. They're just exploring this vulnerability that you create on yourself, and that you open, allowing others to influentiate you, right? So and then what happens is they use those images, and after a long time cultivating those ideas, the obsessed responds almost autonomously to the obsessor desires, in which it becomes this passive instrument of his magnetic connection, right? So that's why we always have to watch out for our acts and for the things that we do. And the more we feed those inferior thoughts and desires, the more vulnerable we become to those obsessors. So that's why it's very important for us to be all constantly watching for ourselves and keeping our sanity in check. And then along the way, as those things are growing, it creates those imbalances in our body, which lead to disease and dismay, distress, and like I said, up to even madness, right? In some cases, spirits might even drive us to commit suicide. So that's why it's so important to have not only the support of the spiritual support from a spiritist center, or even if you're not spiritist, but if you have a different faith, it's always good to have that support, no matter where that's coming from, but also have a support from a mental health professional, because they will also help you to navigate through that journey, right? And typically, the obsession starts pretty small and weak, and then running through the shadows of our souls, right? And then it starts growing over time, getting to the point that it really can control our lives and impact not only ourselves, but our loved ones. So, if you guys ever dealt with any alcoholic in your family, or any person that has drug addictions, like I said, they're not only affecting their lives, but they're affecting the lives of everybody around them. So it's not just about us; it's about our family, our friends, and everybody that we interact with. That's why it's so important to take care of it as soon as we realize you're suffering from some form of obsession. So we cover the what is obsession. We cover how some of those mechanisms are used by the spirits to influentiate us. And again, not only the spirits. So, like I said on the beginning, we live in an era where data flows everywhere, right? So in the past, like, people really relied on others to get information through, because they didn't have internet. At one point, newspapers didn't exist. Newspapers are a relatively new thing, right? So in the past, data would information would come from one to another, and that's how the Bible story has been told, right? One person telling that story to another through several generations. But nowadays, it's quite the opposite. Data is everywhere. We can search on YouTube for videos. You can send your friends messages on your WhatsApp, or text them, or whatever. There's so much stuff going on. So we have to be very critical those days to see, again, if we're not being manipulated, and if those ideas are really tied to ourselves, or to our values, right? So the and I'm gonna give you guys a couple of steps in how to get rid of our obsession. And the very first step, step number one, is to acknowledge that maybe our ideas are not really coming from ourselves, right? So it's really to understand if those ideas are matching our values. And it's crazy, but a lot of people don't think about their values. It's not something that our society those days impose on us. So I'm going to challenge you guys: if you don't have any values, true values, you should start working on them today. And there are lots of like different literatures that will help you to truly understand your values and what are the things that you really stand for inside of your own, right? So, and like I said, if those ideas are conflicting with your true values, that's a red flag that will help you identify you're suffering from some sort of obsession, right? And I mean, most of us know our vices, right? Sometimes we don't. Sometimes it's so automatic that we don't realize that's a vice. But yeah, most of us already know that we have things that we need to work on. If you don't think you have anything to work on, you should talk to someone, talk to someone close, because I mean, like I said, if we're here on earth, it's very likely we have a lot of things that we need to work on. So uh when we when we have those conflicting ideas to our values, that's when we should really pay attention to ourselves, and acknowledge there's something going on that might not be coming from ourselves. So in my case, as being studying spiritism for a while and paying attention to myself, I notice sometimes I get irritated, or I get annoyed, like, really quickly, right? And sometimes it happens like really, really fast. So then I realize I might be suffering some sort of influence. And again, all of us are some sort of mediums, right? So if you guys go, we're currently showing, and I know Marcia and I believe Mirella also helps. They are doing a study of the mediums book, and if you guys read the mediums book from Kardec, all of us suffer, or not suffer, all of us have some level of mediumship. Some people have a more developed mediumship where they can actually see or listen to the spirits, but most of us, we feel we can interact in a way that we don't realize we're interacting. So, like in my case, I notice sometimes if I get irritated too quickly, or if I get annoyed all of a sudden, then that's a trigger to start to pay more attention to myself, because this might not be coming inside of myself. It might be coming from other spirits. And on the other way, elevated spirits are also throwing ideas to us all the time. So sometimes we have this brilliant idea that help us to solve a huge problem, and we feel a lot of very proud of ourselves, but those ideas might not be coming from us. It might be an inspiration coming from above, right? So the good spirits are also influenciating us to the good. So that's why, this interaction with the spiritual world occurs 100% of the time. But depending how our balance is, and how well tuned we are with the good spirits, we might be listening more to them. Or if we are, like I said, too connected to our vices, or if you're not really connected to the spirit, to the good, or working on ourselves very well, then we tend to be more connected to those inferior spirits, or unfortunate spirits. So that's why we have to pay attention. So again, first step, to acknowledge there's something going on with yourself. And then the second thing is praying, right? So, and especially like in different religions, they consider those spirits bad spirits. And again, not necessarily they're bad spirits. Some of them might be spirits that we caused some damage or hurt in the past, right? So, but they're not bad. They're just trying to seek for revenge in our minds. And given they might not have the knowledge that we have as spiritists, or people that are trying to learn more about spiritism, then they just think they're doing the right thing. They're just seeking for justice, because they might feel like that we, for whatever we did to them, that uh, we really didn't suffer what we should, right? And the best way to alleviate their pain is to, maybe even to ourselves, to acknowledge that we could be the villains in a past life, right? So let's ask for forgiveness. And it's not just ask for forgiveness, but show the new version of ourselves, because those spirits are with us all the time. If you guys talk to our friends that do the mediumship practice, they will say that sometimes they will instruct the spirits, because when those sessions happen, um, we talk to the spirits trying to help them, because since they're closer to us than the higher and elevated spirits, they tend to listen to us better. But if you participate in some of those meetings, or if you talk to, I remember Georgie mentioning this, that the spirits follow us, and they really see if we are true to what we're telling them, if it's not just from our mouth, you know, out, right? So they really follow to make sure we're really true to what we are telling them. So the best way to ask forgiveness is to show those spirits your new self, that you're really looking to do the right thing now. Because I mean, all of us, being in this life or in a past life, we always did something wrong, right? But what is in the past is in the past. The only thing that we can change is the future. So instead of like condemning those spirits, we should pray for them and ask for forgiveness, because again, maybe they're just seeking for a revenge, and maybe they don't realize we have changed. And the only way to convince them that we have changed is really to show them the new version of ourselves, right? So that's the second thing. And then once we realize we have been suffering obsession, the third step, it's to change yourself, right? And change can be really, really hard. So I just read a book recently called The Switch, which mostly talk about how to change our lives, mostly like in the business space. But it has a lot of like good ideas and things that we can apply to any changes that we want to make into our lives. Either being, I want to lose a little bit more weight. I want to be nicer to people around us. I want to be closer to my family. So, and then one of the things that the book says is that the hardest part of the change is to take the first step. After you take those first steps, the first steps tend to be the harder. And but as soon as we start taking those first steps and we start seeing the first results of the change, that motivate us to keep going, and then things get much easier after that. So taking the first step is definitely the hardest thing. And then again, remember I was talking to you guys about those triggers, right? So we should always watch for those triggers. So I remember the book, this particular book, he was saying that they did a study where people that tend to overeat after dinner, they typically do it watching TV. So the TV can be a trigger, and it's sometimes unconscious, right? Unconscious. So you basically you're watching TV, and at the same time you think, oh, I should be eating some sort of snack, like maybe popcorns or something like that. So it's almost automatically that we would go and start eating popcorn, right? Or I often hear this from smokers that uh, when they have a break at work and they drink a little bit of coffee, they have this desire of smoking a cigarette. So they have this urge of smoking after drinking coffee. So, you know, I'm not saying drinking coffee is bad, but if we identify that drinking coffee leads us into smoking cigarette, we should try to avoid, especially in the beginning, or reduce the amount of times we drink coffee, because then we're going to disconnect coffee from the cigarette, right? Or like at night, rather than watching TV, because we know if we're going to watch TV, we're going to eat more popcorn. Maybe I should go and read a book, or maybe I should go for a walk after dinner, because if I do that, I'm going to break the habit. And especially on the beginning, it's going to make easier for me to change myself, right? So we have to identify those triggers and start working on them first. And again, watching TV is not bad, but what happens after that might lead into something bad. So that's why it's important to identify and work on those things. And then the fourth thing is, if you're like me and you like to do things around the house, before you do anything, you typically have to learn how to do it, right? So, and again, that's the beauty of nowadays. If you wanna know how to dig a hole properly, there's a video on YouTube that shows you that. Or if you wanna learn how to code, I know Natasha, for instance, she's learning how to become a programmer. She's taking classes on the university, right? So what a great way for us to learn how to tackle obsessions is also learning. And that's why I say spiritism is not necessarily a religion, but it's a way of living. It's a tool in our toolbox that help us to be better, right? So the Spirit's book, the Gospel, and some of the other Kardec's book cover a great deal in how to deal with spiritual obsession. And then in the top of that, you have Chico Xavier, you have books from Divaldo Franco. I mean, the literature covered by Spiritism is so wide and deep. So I strongly recommend you to start, if you think you're dealing with some sort of obsession. Again, a lot of people, when they look for a center because somebody told them like, hey, you might be suffering from obsession, they think that they can come to the center and then all of a sudden the obsessors go away, right? They don't. Like, the only way you can really resolve that problem is when you change yourself, and that's a whole process, right? It takes time. Nothing good comes out of a single interaction, right? So studying is very important. And we, in addition to reading by ourselves here in Osceola, we offer several studies, and we even cover, like I said, this mediums book study that happens every Sunday before our lecture here. So that's an option for us to really um, start exploring and learning a little bit more. And the fifth step is also we need to occupy our minds with new ideas, with inspiring information. Like I mentioned before, obsession starts by this mutual desire that creates this connection with the obsessor, between the obsessor and the obsessed, right? So why don't we start by looking at our daily activities and try to replace some old habits that might trigger behaviors to new healthier ones. So this is the best way for us to change our mindset. And that also implies, in this book, again, this book that I read, The Switch, they mentioned that during the Vietnam War, uh, I don't remember exactly the number, but I believe it was around 60% of the soldiers, of the American soldiers that were in Vietnam at the time, started taking drugs, right? So they were all together dealing with the war. You guys can imagine how hard that was. And then as they were together, drugs, and especially opium at the time, was one of the biggest things for them, because that was kind of like their way to get out of the war for a brief moment. And then the American Health Society at the time was very concerned, because those and I don't know how many thousands of soldiers would come back after the war, and then they would be drug addicts, right? And they didn't know how to deal with that situation. But turns out that they start following some of those soldiers as they were back to the society. And then as they came back to their lives, to their families, I mean, all of a sudden, that that addiction went away, and they couldn't really figure out why that happened. And the reason, and then after doing more studies, they realized that happened because they were not in that environment anymore. So sometimes, if we are, especially if you're dealing with drugs, it's important that we change our environment. So, and sometimes it's hard because, we all have friends, but we have to evaluate if that environment that we're part of, it's really a healthy environment, if it's really making us better people. So it's very important that as those soldiers, some of them were still addicted, but most of them were not anymore, because again, they they broke that behavior. They were not those triggers that would make them use drugs went away, right? And that's how they broke that behavior. So, and by replacing good, healthier behaviors, as spending time with their families, working out, having a healthier type of work, because as you can imagine, a soldier in a war, it's not a very healthy type of job. I mean, it's a really hard job. So as they started doing those things, then they started to feel much better, and they didn't feel the need anymore to use drugs. So, something to keep in mind. And again, like I want to mention the TV again. Rather than watching a reality show that shows gossip or people fighting each other, or a violent movie with lots of blood, I mean, there's nothing wrong of watching those things. But the problem is, if that affects who you are, maybe we should change that. So if you still want to watch TV, watch a documentary talking about some inspiring figure. There's so many out there. Or maybe watch a comedy show instead of like something that shows gossip, something that makes you laugh and makes you really feel good about yourself, right? Or read a book about how to become a better version of yourself. I mean, there's so many things that we can be better, be a better parent, a better leader at work, uh, again, a better helper in your community. So many things that you can do. Exercise, meditation, spending time with your loved ones. There are so many healthier changes that we can incorporate into our lives that, you know, those are kind of like the ways out. And besides studying and changing some old habits, there's one very important point here that I want to make. Helping others is also key for success. And the main reason why is because it shows us how blessed we truly are to what we have and what we don't have, and that our problems are so small in comparison to others, that it brings us really purpose, right? So when you help others, it gives you this boost of energy that is so nice. So I want to give an example here. And I want to call someone out, our friend Raimunda. If you guys ever did any sort of work with her, it's so inspiring. And I remember a couple of years ago, we used to go to the Alameda Food Bank to help them sort fruits and food for people that are in need, right? And then our group always got really good compliments at the end because we had Raimunda there, and it was so inspiring to see her putting so much energy into sorting those fruits and separating everything. And she was working the hardest that I ever seen a person working before, and she was not even making money or anything. It was just for the joy of life, right? So, and then you start to realize that, you know, helping others. So first of all, you start thinking, oh my God, I'm so blessed that I have that much amount of food in my house that I don't have to worry if my family is gonna have a need for food tomorrow, right? So that's the first one. And then you get energized due to the fact that you're helping others, that you're contributing to the society, that you're really becoming part of something bigger. So it really gives you purpose in life, right? Another example I want to give is the shelter that we help providing food. So this shelter is in San Leandro, and we have been working with them for, I would say, around 11 years now. And they shelter women and children that suffer some sort of like home abuse, or that are homeless. And every time and right now with the COVID era, we haven't been able to serve them food. We just cook the food and bring there, and then the people serve it over there. But in the past, we used to be able to go there and serve the people and talk to them. And as you can think, those people are people that are going through some really rough paths. So they're either homeless or they suffer some sort of abuse in their houses. So they're there looking for shelter, right? And then when you give them this home cooked food and they break out this smile, even though they're going through such a hard time, it's so fulfilling and it's so nice. It feels like it's one of the best feelings in the world. So it really, like I said, gives you purpose. So when you're dealing with a situation like that, and helping others is really one of the best ways out of obsession, because again, not only that spirit that is obsessing you will notice, oh my God, this is not the same person that did the harm to me. Look what he's doing now. But you're also inspiring him or her to do better. So it's really like Divaldo tells the story about this little girl that came to. So I'm not sure if you guys know, but he has an organization that helps kids back in his home state, Bahia. And he said he has received a little girl that had all kinds of limitations. And since he was a teenager, I guess, he had this spirit that was always following him for some reason, and causing him harm. So as you can imagine, if Divaldo has obsessors, can you imagine ourselves, right? But anyhow, just to make the story short, because we're already getting close to the end here, uh, Divaldo received this kid, and she has some limitations, and he treats her so nicely. He basically he takes special attention for some reason to that particular girl. And then one day, this spirit comes to him and say, "I'm so grateful that you're doing this because she was my mom, and you're treating her like your family. So from this moment on, I'm not gonna be bothering you anymore. I'm just gonna be here to help you." So he was able to change that corner, right? So it's important that we keep that in mind, that helping others will also help those spirits to understand the new being that we are becoming, right? And then the last point I want to make here: ask for help. Ask from help from your friends, your close ones, and we're here to listen to you here in Osalar. So although we're not in person still, and hopefully soon we're going to be able to be back in person, we still have the ability to do online talk. So we have this fraternal talk that we can have, where we want to listen to your spiritual problems and we might give you some suggestions, right? So we're not gonna judge you. We're not gonna uh, because we have been there. So trust on us, and if you guys need help, please count on us to be the help for you. And again, just to recap, because it was a lot of like different points. So acknowledgement that we might be suffering influence from others is the first step. Praying for those individuals that might be causing this obsession to us helps us in a great way. Taking the first step is the hardest part, but everything else gets easier after that. Let's look into our bad habits and try to incorporate new, healthier habits. Let's immerse ourselves into study, because the more we study, the more we will validate inside of our minds that we're doing the right thing, and that will inspire us to be better. And then this relentless work and effort in helping others will also make us become a better version of ourselves. That's the master key to free ourselves from all the handcuffs that we might have, right? And so if we follow this set of recipe, I'm sure we're gonna do really well. And as a conclusion here, I want to challenge all of you to start right now. Even myself, because I'm in no ways like perfect, and I still have a lot of things to work on me. And I think that's one of the reasons why I'm doing this speech here today. So I want to challenge you to start right now, because in just a blip, you're gonna look at the mirror and you're really gonna be happy with this new version of yourself. So thank you very much, and I hope you guys enjoy our lecture today.